It begins with modest things. A rag soaked in oil, rough to the touch but given sheen by residue. A match struck faintly, its spark fragile as breath. Window shutters pressed closed against summer's damp heat. A night heavy. Silence pressed to skin like another garment worn too long. The whip was loud. Commands were louder, but fire in its first breath is shy. It quivers, it hides. The flame does not scream, it claims. And before it rises, there is always that pause. Stillness denser than air, silence pressing before ignition. On the Mississippi earth, a wagon hinge cooled under moonless night, its iron holding warmth of use, smell of metal lingering with oil and dust. Small tokens lay scattered, rag, match, iron hinge, shutters drawn. None seem weapons, but each, in silence, buttressed memory. The enslaved knew flame marked more than timber. Fire entered memory in ways whips could not. Flames turn ordinary walls into witnesses, turn quarters into scripture none can silence. Smoke carries to sky what the ground already remembers. The silence of that summer did not break in words. It only waited, taut as rope, weighted as stone. The air itself seemed to lean forward, asking, "When will it come?" The quarters lay low against Mississippi soil, crouching rather than standing. Walls warped by flood, doors sagging on swollen hinges that moaned when stirred. Roofs tarred rough, patched so rain might be held back, until storms found new seams. Each structure whispered poverty in timber, yet shouted domination in design. Narrow windows shuttered tight, meant to ventilate and surveil, not to grant comfort. Mosquitoes hummed their endless litany, pressed against torn screen, drone vibrating in ears like fever. Ink stained the plantation ledgers harder than any axe stroke. Night after night, columns filled with names reduced to numbers, children as tallies, bushels condensed from backs bent low. An ink blot here obscured a figure, perhaps child's age, perhaps quarters ration. Error or concealment, no one living within doubted its intent, to make bodies serve as lines. In corners of quarters, cornmeal dust powdered air and lingered in nostrils. The smell of lamp oil held rooms in its grasp, sour and constant, even after flames were snuffed. Every lamp flicker etched faces into temporary relief. Eyes ringed dark, brows furrowed, silence pressing full. Steps across damp ground wore paths between quarters and fields, between cabins and crib. Footprints pressed heavy and filled with water when rain fell. Footsteps mapped into soil like ledgers, written below earth instead of page. The ground remembers, where children ran, where mothers left burdens, where men staggered after lash. Memory etched deeper in mud than ink could alter. The view, always. Fields unending, waterline glimmering. Across river, big house rose with columns white as bone, presenting itself to world beyond, while quarters sagged humble beneath. Power was architectural, visible in proportions, rooms measured by plenty or want. Here, every hinge squeak, every oil flicker, every smudge of ink reminded who counted lives and who endured counting. Amid this world walked Abram, tasked with horses, his movements deliberate as theirs. He spoke little, silence serving as shield. Stillness cloaked him, not weakness but weight, presence heavy without gesture. Cloth folded at his waist absorbed sweat. Fabric carried scent of effort, of soil, became token of days repeated. His eyes, steady, met lamplight sometimes, ember glow catching cheekbones, reflecting watchfulness. In stalls, rhythm of horse's breath steadied his own, hooves shifting, flank warm under palm. He mirrored that slowness, patience older than hardship. Silence wrapped him. But silence was not absence, It was ledger. Inward tallies written, each cruelty witnessed inscribed without ink, counting with breath. Each night, Abram lay with that invisible record pressing on him. Names of the lost catalogued in inward silence, every lash a line tallied, every cry left unrecorded elsewhere entered by memory. Stillness became his dominion, a record none could strip away. Eyes captured sorrow, eyes carried resolve. Silent, yes, but silence was his manuscript. The three planters united cruelty into ceremony. Not careless acts, but measured exhibitions. Their canes tapped floor like judicial gavels, announcing presence, punctuating command. Whip followed, its crack echo lodging in marrow, startling not only struck, but all who heard. Tobacco haze trailed them, clouds settling into wood beams, scent mingling with whiskey fumes. Boots ground stair with rehearsed step, announcing authority with each grind. Silence grew taut around them until they broke it. Splitting night like kindling snapped. They inflicted punishment as performance before witnesses, spectacle carved into routine. Pain itself their scripture, each body struck inscription of rule. They held belief cruelty must be ritual, repeated like prayer, preserved in memory's echo. Together they moved, trio of power, reinforcing one another with shared gaze, shared whiskey, shared command. No single man punished, three together did. Their unity was itself execution. To Abram and others, map of their cruelty became visible. Patterns form when repeated too often, and what is mapped may be undone. Summer brooded, storms swelled, lightning flickered without rain, clouds lumbering slow. In quarters, lanterns smoked black despite fresh oil, smoke lifting as omen. Boards creaked unbidden as if house itself restless. River, water rose against pilings, then fell strangely, rhythm erratic. Dogs barked at emptiness and then fled, refusing call. Air thickened, pressing heavy with omens unsaid. Names murmured low in corridors, carried along humid air like threads. Whispers threaded between cabins, hints of timing, echoes of signs. Stalks around creaked and whispered in Minnesota humidity like cloth rubbed together. Every sound, omen. Every silence, signal. The ground, too, seemed poised, swelling slightly, sighing under pressure of memory, as if ready to receive. Illness seeped through house and quarter alike. Overseer and servant both coughed, cloths pressed to brows, fevers rising. Physicians came brisk, polished canes tapping thresholds with false certainty. Diagnoses varied: swamp fever, miasma, oppressive heat. Each theory collapsed with remedy's failure. Lamp gutters marked their visits, flames leaning away from damp. Doors groaned beneath their entrance, hinges crying under weight. They spoke of vapors, never of cruelty's hand nor silence's gathering. Abram and others knew better. These patterns could not be coincidence. They counted hours between coughs, counted who faltered next. Rhythm clear to them, invisible ledger growing. Illness in their eyes was sign, foretelling written not by air but by reckoning. Silence thickened. Whispers hushed to glances only. The afflicted planters grew tired in their cruelty, boots dragging unevenly on stair. Silence was seed, growing down into soil. In shadows, coughs measured like pendulum swings, tally marks carved inward. It was not fever. It was timing. It was foretelling of what would come when silence resolved itself. Excellent. Let's complete Part 2, Chapters 7 to 12, bringing the full script to 3,500 words exactly. When the moon withheld its light, silence deepened. It was not accident. Night itself chose complicity. The enslaved gathered tokens, each man carrying reminder of time and intention. An iron hinge shard, pried from broken gate, cold in palm, a fragment of confinement made portable. A cord knotted thrice, each knot a vow in miniature. A stone smoothed by river water, heavy enough to remind of endurance, light enough to pocket. And the rag soaked in oil, folded twice, its smell pungent, its purpose hidden until match should kiss edge. These were not weapons of spectacle. They bore no gleam, carried no roar. Tokens only, yet weighted by decision. When cloth was folded, when hinge pressed hand, when cord knot dug into skin, silence bound into pact. The evening air hung with summer smells, damp soil, sweat, sweet rotting vegetation, breaths of river not far away. Dusk folded over cabins, fields, big house, all dimming together. Silence breathed heavy, pressing skin as though cloth laid on body. Each man counted his breaths, 20 before moving, 10 before meeting shadows by crib, 5 before hand would press rag. Counting, always counting, because justice in silence must be measured. In distance, planters drank, played cards, their sounds cutting board air, but faint, insulated by their illusion of permanence. In quarters, silence was vow. Every hinge groan, every floor creak catalogued. Tonight, silence would be not absence, but force. So the night hardened, tokens gathered, silence pronounced, moon gone. The hour sealed itself as though ledger closed mid-stroke, page written, not in ink, but in waiting. There was no announcement, no shout. Fire began as whisper cupped in palm. Rag pressed against doorway, match drawn sharp, flare so small it could be mistaken for lantern routine. Oil drank flame eagerly. Wood did not scream when it caught. It sighed. Timbers long dry, releasing small sound as ember took root. This sigh spread, carried itself plank to plank, until flame had rhythm. At first, no one noticed. Glow too small, mistaken as lamp, as ordinariness. But flame is relentless. It does not pause once fed. Within breaths, glow fattened, pushing against shutter, spilling across ground. Heat pressed skin through window panes, air thickened inside. Boots thudded at last, planters roused too slow, drunken command muffled. They called names unanswered, stepping toward blaze that already claimed. Counting seconds, fire spread doorway to roofline, leaping as ledger leaps from one column to next. Silence pressed before, but now in crackle's rhythm, silence carried another voice. The quarters were not screaming. They were being claimed. Within fire's enclosure, ritual completed. The 3 planters tried first with boots, rushing, but boots slipped on boards already glowing. Beams cracked overhead, sharp reports like punctuation-ending chapters. Smoke filled their throats faster than orders could escape. Muffled cries cut short, absorbed in roar. To witnesses hidden in dark, it was not scene of chaos, but ceremony fulfilling itself. Each collapse, a note measured inwardly. First, the one with Cain, then the one with whiskey, then the last. Names tallied not in ink, but in breath. Ledger kept silently, count aligning balance. Fire folded boards, grain shifted, air pressed flames down and then up again, swallowing. When silence returned, it was not silence of peace. It was silence swollen with memory. Morning found ash layered thick, smoldering still. Word traveled quick, distorted quicker. Accident, said some. Negro unrest, said others. None sought truth whole. Courthouse steps wet with rain as proceedings opened. Quills hovered, then blotted thick mid-stroke. Pages smudged beyond legibility. Better absence than testimony. Ledger missing entry, overseer reduced to void. Neighbors whispered in restraint. Safer to claim accident, safer to quiet the fields than to admit reckoning, safer to preserve illusion, to keep cotton flowing. Church bell tolled muffled, rain softening its chime. Silence over ash carried heavier than any proclamation. What records denied, soil preserved. The ground remembers always. Years dimmed flame, but memory smoldered. Children recited rhyme. 3 in the flame, name after name. Farmers claimed to unearth charred hinge by riverbank, iron black, brittle to touch. Archivists copied rumors faintly, margin notes later struck by editor's ink, footnotes suppressed, yet ghost traces remained. Ash settled but refused to vanish. Around fires, stories carried. Tales whispered of cabins that glowed red without spark, of sighs heard when fields hushed too long. The rhyme endured longer than records, ember of recollection carried in song, in fear, in quiet pride. Truth scattered, fact thinned, ember carried forward, ash turned into oral fire. No verdict seals this night, reported differently, erased often, recalled partially. Yet silence after flame still breathes. An empty hearth stands in ruins, ash clinging. A hinge rusted black lies half buried. Night winds press window shutters in houses long rebuilt. Timbers creak with memory. Was it justice or was it fire answering fire without conclusion? Reckoning cannot be shelved. It endures presence, silence pressing, air heavy before storm, ground saturated with names denied paper. Fire died, but its silence afterward holds. Reckoning smolders in the soil, in the rhyme of children, in the hush of timbers. The ground remembers, and it will not release.